I was sitting in the front row at my son Ethan's wedding on a sprawling ranch just outside Fredericksburg, Texas, when his future mother-in-law, Vivian Caldwell, said loud enough for at least 3 tables to hear, "That's not a mother, that's a mistake in a dress." The bride, Avery, laughed and clapped her hands like she'd just heard the punchline of the year, but Ethan didn't laugh. He stood up, walked to the microphone, called off the wedding in front of 220 guests, and the very next morning took a step that quietly dismantled their entire family fortune. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe if you love stories where arrogance meets reality. Now, let me tell you how we arrived at this glorious disaster, because revenge, when served cold and calculated, really is the sweetest flavor. 6 months earlier, I was living my quiet life in a modest ranch-style house on the edge of Fredericksburg. At 61, I'd spent years perfecting the art of being exactly what people expected. A widow getting by on her late husband's pension, driving a 2012 Toyota Camry, baking casseroles for church suppers, and tending a small vegetable garden. What no one knew, not even my son, was that the image was almost entirely fiction. When my husband, Paul, passed in 2010, the insurance payout was $210,000. I never touched the principal. Instead, I quietly spread it across energy sector investments, mineral rights on West Texas oil and gas leases, royalty interests in proven fields, dividend-paying energy stocks, and a few well-timed ETFs. While oil prices swung wildly, I stayed patient, reinvested dividends, and let compound growth do the heavy lifting. By early 2025, my net worth had quietly crossed $4.3 million. I still drove the same old Camry, I still shopped at H-E-B, I still looked like every other small-town Texas widow, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Ethan had been dating Avery Caldwell for 9 months when she decided they were getting engaged. I'd met her exactly twice before she started planning the wedding like it was a hostile takeover. First meeting, Ethan's birthday barbecue. She spent the evening photographing her brisket plate for Instagram while casually asking how secure I felt about aging alone. Second meeting, she brought her mother Vivian to get to know the family. Vivian walked through my house like she was doing a welfare check, offering unsolicited advice about simplifying and perhaps considering assisted living options soon. Avery opened kitchen drawers and cabinets like she was appraising collateral. Vivian settled into Paul's old recliner and delivered the line that lit the fuse. "We're just so pleased Ethan found someone who values family support. It's wonderful when the older generation can still offer emotional contributions." I nearly laughed into my iced tea. Here they were, patting the harmless old widow on the head, assuming my future would involve babysitting and gratitude checks. If they'd done even basic homework, they'd have noticed my maiden name, the same maiden name tied to one of the original mineral rights families in Reagan County. But they never asked. Rich people often don't. The engagement was announced in October. Avery called me personally to share the exciting news and inform me they'd already booked the Caldwell family ranch for a late May wedding. No discussion about dates, no input from our side, just a courtesy heads up that my more modest family might prefer simpler expectations. I made the appropriate cooing noises while mentally filing every condescending word. 3 weeks later, sitting in my financial advisor's office in Austin, I reviewed the latest statements. "Miss Reynolds," he said, sliding the portfolio summary across the desk, "your energy holdings have performed exceptionally. Between royalty checks, lease bonuses, and stock appreciation, you're sitting at approximately $4.3 million liquidatable value, not counting the producing mineral interests." I smiled politely, but inside I was already sketching the outline of what would become Project Lesson. Ethan called that afternoon, voice full of excitement. "Mom, the Caldwells want to have you over for a proper dinner next weekend. Nothing fancy, just family. They're really looking forward to it." "How nice," I said. "At the ranch?" Yeah, it's been in the family for generations. Dad's oil money built most of it back in the 80s. I should probably warn you, they're pretty well off. Sweet boy. He was actually worried I'd feel out of place among rich folks. If only he knew I'd been getting quarterly royalty statements from the same basins that had originally funded the Caldwell lifestyle. The Caldwell Ranch was everything you'd expect. Limestone house, live oak shaded patio, infinity pool overlooking rolling hills, and a garage full of vehicles that cost more than most people's homes.
I pulled up in the Camry behind Ethan's used F-150 and immediately felt the familiar weight of judgment. Avery greeted me with an air kiss. "Mrs. Reynolds, so glad you could make it to the ranch." Vivian descended the wide staircase in pearls and a silk blouse. "Margaret, dear, we've heard so much about you." Dinner was served on the covered patio: steak, lobster mac and cheese, imported wine. Conversations centered on the Caldwell's recent trip to Aspen, their yacht club membership in Corpus Christi, and Avery's vision for the wedding: peonies shipped from Ecuador, a live band from Austin, 250 guests minimum. Then Vivian delivered the line that locked in my decision. "Margaret," she said, swirling her wine, "we don't expect your side to contribute equally to the wedding costs. We understand different families have different capacities. We're happy to handle the major expenses so no one feels strained." Ethan looked mortified. I just smiled and thanked her for her thoughtfulness. After dinner, Vivian gave me the tour, really an excuse to showcase the wine cellar, the art collection, and the master suite bigger than my entire house. "This ranch has been in the family since Daddy's mineral rights started paying out big in the 80s, she explained proudly. "We've modernized, of course, but kept the legacy intact." I nodded. "It's beautiful. You must feel very fortunate." Avery chimed in. "That's why we're so excited for Ethan to join the family. We want him to understand what real stability looks like." Translation: Ethan was marrying up, and we should be grateful for the promotion. That's when I began phase 1. The next morning, I started digging. Public records, lease filings, production reports. The Caldwell's fortune wasn't as rock solid as they pretended. Several key mineral leases were approaching expiration, 2 major wells were in decline and needed expensive workovers. The ranch itself carried a $2.8 million mortgage hidden behind a trust, but not hidden well enough. Vivian's old money side had been eroded by bad investments and a brother who burned through cash. They were asset-rich and cash flow tight. Classic Texas big hat, no cattle syndrome. I called my advisor. "Robert, I want to liquidate $750,000 in stages over the next 4 months. We're going to position ourselves in the Permian Basin lease market." Then I called a specialist attorney in Midland who handles mineral rights and acquisitions. By week 3, we had formed Reynolds Energy Holdings, LLC, with Ethan listed as the primary beneficiary and managing member once the gift was revealed. The plan was simple and devastatingly effective. Quietly buy up expiring or distressed mineral interests around the Caldwell's best-producing leases, then negotiate from strength when those leases came up for renewal or sale. The real knockout punch? A major operator was quietly consolidating the section, and they needed contiguous acreage to justify a new drilling program. Whoever controlled those key tracks would dictate terms. Phase 2 began at the rehearsal dinner, held at their country club, naturally. I wore my nicest but still modest navy dress and brought a simple silver picture frame as a gift. Vivian spent the evening explaining how practical it would be for me to downsize after the wedding. "Senior communities are wonderful these days," she said, patting my hand. "And when Avery and Ethan start a family, we'll want the grandchildren to have a grandmother who's appropriate." Appropriate. That word echoed in my head for days. 2 weeks before the wedding, I finalized everything.
Reynolds Energy Holdings now controlled 68% of the mineral interests surrounding the Caldwell's flagship lease block. We also held options on 2 key tracts that would expire in 90 days, tracts the Caldwells desperately needed to maintain production. The wedding day arrived bright and hot. I arrived early in my Camry, placed my modest $4,000 wedding check envelope among the pile of much thicker ones, and sat quietly while florists and caterers swarmed the ranch. At 3:40 p.m., while the string quartet tuned up, Vivian stood near the gift table with her sister and muttered, just loud enough, "Look at her in that discount dress, trying so hard. That's not a mother, that's a mistake in a dress." Avery overheard, laughed, and clapped. "Mom, stop. But seriously, she looks like she wandered in from a church potluck." Ethan, standing nearby, adjusting his tie, froze. I watched his face change, the uncertainty he'd worn for months replaced by something cold and final. He walked to the microphone. The quartet stopped mid-note. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said clearly, "I need to say something." Avery smiled, thinking it was a cute surprise. "Tyler, darling, the ceremony's about to start." He looked at her for a long beat. "5 minutes ago, I heard you and your mother mocking my mom. You called her a mistake in a dress and laughed like it was funny." The silence was suffocating. "My mother raised me alone after Dad died," he continued. "She worked nights, went without, never complained, and she's been nothing but gracious while your family treated her like a charity case. I can't marry someone who finds cruelty entertaining. I can't join a family that thinks that's acceptable. So I'm calling this wedding off, right now." Gasps. Avery's bouquet hit the ground. Vivian rushed forward, but Ethan stepped away. Richard Caldwell, Avery's father, exploded. "You ungrateful little nobody. We gave you a future, a management track at the energy firm, a place in this family. And this is how you repay us? By humiliating my daughter?" Ethan looked at him calmly. "You offered me a job that would keep me under your thumb for years. That's not opportunity, that's control." Richard sneered. "You think your small-town background and your discount dress mother are going to get you anywhere?" That's when I stood. I smoothed my modest dress, walked to the microphone, and took it gently from my son. "May I say a few words, sweetheart?" He nodded. I looked out at the stunned crowd, Fredericksburg's bankers, oilmen, ranchers, and socialites. "First, thank you to the Caldwell family for this educational afternoon. Richard," I said pleasantly, "you're right that control matters in business. That's why, over the past few months, Reynolds Energy Holdings acquired majority interest in the mineral blocks surrounding your flagship lease, along with options on the 2 tracks you need for your next renewal." Richard's face went gray. "I'm talking about the Section 47 and 52 interests," I continued, "the ones expiring in 90 days, the ones your production forecasts depend on. We now hold the contiguous acreage the big operator needs for their new program. They won't drill without it." Silence stretched like taut wire. "Some people mistake modesty for weakness," I said, "quiet for stupid, kindness for powerlessness. My limitation is simple. I don't tolerate people who treat other human beings like they're disposable based on a bank balance." I turned to Ethan. "Your wedding gift is in my car. Paperwork making you managing member of Reynolds Energy Holdings. It comes with better opportunities than anything you were offered here." I sat back down. The rest unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck. Richard followed me to the parking area, voice shaking. "This is impossible. Those interests? Do you know what capital that took?" "About $1.9 million in staged acquisitions," I said helpfully, "with projected royalty streams of $5 to $7 million over the next 4 years, assuming favorable negotiations, of course." He realized then I wasn't just rich, I was positioned to decide whether his remaining leases stayed profitable or became stranded assets. "What do you want?" he whispered. Nothing, I said. I never wanted anything from you. Your family assumed we needed your approval, your scraps, your pity. We didn't. Ethan joined us, still in his tux, holding the folder I'd prepared. Mom, this is real? Congratulations, I told him. You're no longer an entry-level employee hoping for favors. You're a principal in an energy company that can outbid, outlease, and outproduce the Caldwell's entire operation. 3 months later, Ethan ran his first board call from our new, modest office in Midland. The company was valued at $8.1 million and climbing. Richard Caldwell had sold the ranch to cover margin calls. Vivian and Avery moved to a condo in San Antonio. The family energy firm was quietly shedding leases. Ethan asked me over coffee one morning, "Do you ever regret how it ended for them?" I looked out at the Texas sky. I regret they chose cruelty over courtesy. The consequences were their own. I just stopped protecting them from reality. He hugged me. Thanks, Mom, for everything, for teaching me that real strength doesn't shout, it simply stands up when it matters. I smiled. Always remember, son, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's success so complete that their opinions become background noise. And that's exactly what we built. Thanks for listening. Share your own story in the comments. We all have a chapter where someone underestimated us. Your voice matters.